Today we're teaching a workshop on coaching people to be more confident. And when you think about confidence, confidence is a pretty wide, nebulous term. And I think about confidence in the context of someone willing to try something void of guaranteed results. Whether it's a new job, whether it's a promotion, whether it's a speech. Confidence is very brittle, yet it's very powerful. So what I want to walk you through is a couple stories and some strategies of what you can utilize to build confidence in other people. First, let me start with a quick story. I think confidence is something that is learned early on. And I remember when I was coaching basketball, my son Liam was on the team, and I remember we were in this packed gym, and of course parents are yelling, and they're yelling at the refs, and they're yelling at the kids, and there's a lot of people. And I thought, wow, these kids are in third and fourth grade. And I remember he came down the court and he put up a shot and went in the hoop and it bounced out and we lost by a point. And he was really upset. He was devastated in that moment because it's a huge stage. And I ran over to him and I said, wow, that was awesome, Liam. And he said, Dad, I missed. So I don't care if you missed. He said, what are you talking about? I said, Liam, that showed great courage. He said, what are you talking about? And he had tears in his eyes. I mean, his eyes were welt up with water because he felt like he had failed. Now, did he miss the shot? Yeah, he missed the shot. Part of it, there was a failure component. But overall, he did not fail. And I said, let me just share this with you, Liam. I said, when you came down the court, some of your teammates were praying you were not going to pass them the ball. And I made the joke. I said, one kid went right off the court, went down the hall, went to the bathroom, and never came back till they heard the buzzer go off knowing the game was over. And he started to laugh a little bit. And I remember this friend of mine came up to him who was a father on the other team. And Rich came up to him and said, man, I've never seen a kid shoot as well as you did tonight. You should be really proud of yourself. So he went from red and tears to smiling and then looking at his friend Daniel saying, let's go get something to eat. And he forgot about it. Now, in that moment, had I stopped my foot, yelled, darn it, Liam, what would have happened? Would he have had more confidence or less the next time he has to take the shot? So my last comment to Liam was, I don't care if you missed it, but the question you have to ask yourself, are you willing to take the next shot when it's afforded to you? And I could see that he was sinking. So a couple years later, we get in a traveling team. And I'd say over about 2 weeks, Liam had literally 4 or 5 buzzer beaters. He could really, really shoot the ball. He was confident. Now, what would have happened in that moment had I screamed at him? Had my friend Rich not come up and given him or provided him with positive praise? He may have wanted to pass the ball because then the association with that moment is what? Failure. I'm going to disappoint people. So I go to a great documentary I saw on Mullally, who took over Ford Motor Company when it was turned around. And they had this secret room at Ford Motor headquarters. And he asked a question about something and nobody would speak up. And finally, some gentleman said, well, Mr. Mullally, the problem with the car is XYZ. And Mullally looked at him. He said, okay. And he started to clap. And everybody's looking at this new CEO like, what's wrong with this guy? And he said, I want you all to be confident with the truth. We can't solve problems. Now, this room had always been locked. It wasn't open to outsiders. And what he did is he opened it up. He said, the more transparent we are with ourselves and with one another, we're going to be more confident in the problems we have to solve. That moment completely changed Ford Motor Company. So I think about a woman that I worked with years ago. We were in a meeting and she was not participating. She sat back and the person who was facilitating the meeting was a friend of mine. And he asked me to observe. It was not the area of the contract that we were working on. So as he left and we were going to go grab lunch and as he left, I put in some headsets and this woman who was very quiet, started to, dare I say, speak, if not gossip, and started to make comments like, that meeting was awful. I don't think people are going to do this. It's stupid. The meeting's content was about handling conflict with one another and make sure you go to the source. My friend leaves the room. She immediately undermines not only him, but the topic that they just covered and that they all agreed to. They would be transparent and candid and would always go to the source. So I didn't blink. What she didn't know is I didn't have my music on yet, and I chose not to turn it on. And I listened to her. So she and a couple other people leave, and my friend comes back in and said, "Do you want to go get some lunch?" And I smiled, and he said, "What's wrong?" I said, "You're not going to believe what just happened." And I told him, and he said, "Oh, you got to be kidding me." And you could just see he was deflated. And I said, "It's really interesting. The minute you left the room, a whole different person came out. She became confident with her opinion, but she didn't want to share it in a group setting. There's a reason why." And he said, "Well, maybe I'll send her an email." I said, "No, we're going to the department right now where she works." So we went there and we sat in some chairs outside of all the cubicles and just pretended to read. And we could hear her complaining about the meeting. She comes around the corner and she sees us, and she just turns tomato red. And I said, do you have a second?" She said, "Sure." I said, "Well, let's go into your conference room." It was a smaller room, and the three of us sat down, and my friend Scott, I said, "Let me handle this." And I said, "I don't want you to speak. I don't want you to feel defensive. I want you to feel this is the opportunity of a lifetime. And I want to give you 24 hours, and we're going to get back together and we're going to chat. But I want to share with you factually, not opinion, factually what just occurred." Scott led this meeting. The minute he left that room, you started to gossip about two other people why the meeting was dumb. My headsets were in. The music wasn't on. She is a dark shade of apple red, and I thought she was going to pass out. I said, "Look, there's a reason you did that. And it could be destructive. It could be constructive. It could be positive. It could be negative. I don't know what it is. Yet I want to give you time to really reflect, think about how Scott felt, think about how you might feel, how you might handle that differently." And I said, the amazing thing is, factually, the content was about going to the source. The minute the source left the room, you started to talk negatively. There's a reason why you did not speak up in the meeting. I would love to have you take some time. Let's get back together tomorrow and let's thoughtfully explore that together. So we leave and we go to lunch, and my friend Scott said, "I think you gave her a free pass." I said, "Oh, she's doing some deep diving right now because she's thinking, how much trouble am I in?" She's going to have a moment of authenticity and honesty with herself. So we get back together, and she ends up looking at us, and she said, "Well, to be honest with you, when I speak up, my history has been, I've always been discounted. Every single time I'd speak up at my old employer, I was literally cut off, and my ideas were never good enough." And I sat there and I said, "Okay." And I smiled, and she said, "Scott, I really owe you an apology. It was unprofessional. I give you my commitment. It won't happen again." And I said, "Well, let's go back a second." I said, "Why did your ex-employer do that to you from your perception standpoint?" Because I wasn't there. I'm assuming it's true. She said, "I was the only woman on the leadership team. And there was our aha moment. She wasn't really given a voice in her mind and from her perception." And I said, "So can I leave you with a thought?" And I said, "I think we just stop here." And she said, "Sure." I said, "You have given power to your ex-employer for your current behavior at the expense of your personal development and growth within this company." And she looked at me, she goes, "What does that mean?" I said, "They're still in charge of you. They're still making you feel a certain way. They zapped your confidence to speak up. And I would imagine you have a lot of good insight. Yet you resorted to very negative insight because you felt like you were discounted. Yet you transferred that responsibility of how you're feeling to Scott without even involving him. How unfair is that?" And she goes, "It's terribly unfair." I said, "So you have an opportunity to think about how can I bring my ideas forward, knowing we've had this conversation, knowing we're going to give you every ample opportunity to provide insight and that we really listen. So we leave again. And Scott and I go and we get something to drink. And he goes, what do you think I should do? I said, the next time she speaks up in that meeting, praise her. Literally look at her and say, wow, that's great insight. I'm happy you shared that. I said, Tim, I do that with everybody. I said, yeah, but she hasn't spoke up yet. So about a month or two goes by and I kind of forget about it because it wasn't part of our contract. And Scott calls me and he said, I got to tell you, she's a completely different person. I said, what happened? He said, I did what you said. She came back into my office again and said, I really want to apologize. I said, sure. I would have imagined the guilt is pretty high. And he said, I cannot believe how much she has turned around. I said, isn't that great? And so these are the kind of things that when we are coaching other people to be confident, we have to facilitate the experience. Did Scott have the opportunity to be angry? Absolutely. Could Scott have raised his voice and been justified? Probably. Would that have instilled confidence? Because it was clear she had confidence in one setting and not in the other. Her insight was pretty good. So we actually turned a really dreadful situation that normally turns into an arduous interaction into one that was very positive. Till this day, 2 years later, she's an incredibly confident leader and has actually received a promotion from Scott.